Today we have with us Tara Rutley, who is an ISS program scientist, or the associate program scientist, to tell us a little bit about some work we saw going on yesterday in the Kibo laboratory, where flight engineer Aki Hoshide was setting up the aquatic habitat. Thanks so much for joining us, Tara.
Hey, it's really good to be back. I love talking to you guys and sharing the science that's happening. And so, yeah, it sounds like the JAXA aquatic habitat is making its way onto station, and the crew is assembling it. And I really think this is a really fun facility for future investigations because it introduces a new type of physiological model, and that's a fish. So
Right.
the space station will get its first fish tank,
Is
so
it
to speak.
is it basically like an aquarium, or?
Yeah, the way the hardware is set up is that it's a system of two aquariums, and each one is about half a liter. And the system can support anywhere from 8 to 12 fish, if they're zebrafish or medaka fish. Those are the two types that will be studied here. And the system is basically kind of a lot like what you'd see on the ground in terms of keeping your fish healthy. You've got an environmental control system that has a biological filter that filters out the waste. There's a lighting control system, an LED version that gives night and day light and dark cycles, so the fish have cues because you don't get that in space
Okay.
station. There's automatic feeders for the fish, and there's an oxygenation system that makes sure the fish get the oxygen and the water that they need too. So it's a nice big facility that'll be located in the Kibo module of Space Station. And I think the first set of fish are scheduled to go up here in the fall on a Soyuz flight.
Okay.
So that's pretty exciting.
And for some reason, I'm imagining this, the little plastic bags that you carry home from a fair when you win a goldfish. I'm probably
Yeah,
not like that,
not
though.
exactly, right? Because space flight's a little bit more complicated than that. These fish will go up in a small round container that will be loaded, and they have membranes that allow exchange of air for the fish, loaded with water, and then launched up on a Soyuz, and then automatically inserted into the habitat. When this piece of hardware gets inserted into the habitat, it will release the fish and fill the aquarium. So it's
Okay.
pretty exciting, and this isn't the first time that we've flown fish in space. Our JAXA colleagues have had a history of good experience with, especially zebrafish and medaka fish. They've flown in space.
That's what was going to be in this.
Yeah, yes. Particularly, they flew on the early space shuttle flights, the Space Lab flights, and
Okay.
they were particularly looking at changes in the fish's vestibular system, or the system responsible for balance, and that plays a big role in motion sickness. So the longest that they've ever flown fish were 16 days on a shuttle flight. So what we're looking at now for space station is about a 90-day flight. So we want to be able to breed fish over 3 different generations. So the
Wow.
first set of fish will be born on the ground, launched into space, survive, ideally, reproduce in space, so they'll have children, and then after that, that generation will produce more fish that were pure space bred and developed. So the things that the scientists want to look at when we're talking about looking at these fish, why would you even want to do that? Longer exposure to spaceflight tells us more about something that might be applicable to the crew health. For example, you can get a good look at these particular fish's muscle system, their skeletal system, and crew on long duration space flights have a lot of changes in their muscle and their bone systems, and so we can get a little bit of information from how these fish develop and the longer they stay as well through their bone and muscle. We also can look at effects of radiation on these particular fish as well, and in fact, we may glean some really interesting information about how they develop, early development on space station, because a lot of the way even we develop, everything that develops, every living organism has this response to gravity. They develop based on this gravity vector. So it'd be really interesting to see the development progression in a situation where you take that microgravity environment away. How will these fish turn out? So I know the crew that gets these fish are excited. I've talked to them about it. They're anxious to get going on it, and it sounds like the development is progressing along. And so the first set of experiments is going to be called Medaka osteoclast. That will start in the fall when these fish go up. And osteoclast is a type of cell that's very active in breaking down the bone. It's normal. In microgravity, there seems to be a process by which they prevail and go kind of a little bit in hyperactive mode. As a result, you intend to break down more bone. So the investigators will look at the activity of the osteoclast in these fish after their long duration stay on microgravity.
Okay. Well, a couple of things you said. You mentioned that we're going to be breeding them in the space station.
Hmm.
I know, let's see, we brought up before, and all on purpose, mice and spiders
Yep.
and butterflies. But have we done anything that's we've had several generations of?
No, nothing that's been this long term in terms of generational. We've sent up, actually, we've sent up seedlings. I think plants might be a good way
Okay.
to think about it. And so one of the challenges of plant growth is to just get multi generations of seed to seed formation. So this will be, I think, the longest going investigation set in terms of generational producing of any living organisms on
Yeah.
in
So
space.
not only how the ones that started on Earth adapt to microgravity, but also the ones who have never experienced gravity at all.
You got that right. Yeah, that'll
Okay.
be neat.
Interesting. And let's see, you also said that I think that it's going to last 90 days.
Hmm.
So that gives us a few crew that will be involved.
Yeah.
Did they get a lot of special training for it, or is it just throw in some fish flakes? Or
I think the training they get is specific to, injecting the fish into their home and then removing them when the investigation's over, as well as they may add some flakes to the automatic feeder. But otherwise, it's a see-through tank, so they can watch the activity these fish swim around. So it'd be interesting to see what their perspective is, behavior-wise. What the crew thinks about having fish on orbit.
well, and this may reveal my ignorance, but I guess we practice for spacewalks in water to simulate microgravity. The fish are already in water. Will it feel, I don't know, very different to them, or is
I
it
guess we'll find out. The vestibular studies showed some changes in their inner ears. So there's definitely something going on in terms of their physiology, I guess you could say. So it'll be interesting to see, how that manifests, and especially with that third generation. Um, it's hard to say since we haven't gone that far before.
okay? And I guess I also read that this could eventually be used for amphibians, possibly as well.
Yeah.
Nothing planned for
Yep.
that, but it could.
Yeah, the tank is pretty versatile. Just imagine what you could put in your tank at home that could survive maybe frogs, right? Or snails or eels even. I've seen it. I was just at the aquarium a few days ago with my daughter, and we
Oh,
were looking
really?
at fish, and I'm going, what could survive in that aquatic habitat? I was wondering the same thing myself. So who
Okay, well,
knows? We have a long time on space
just
station,
have a
so
menagerie up there
that's right.
eventually.
Never know.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming and talking with
You're
us. I
very
really
welcome.
appreciate it.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Again, this was Tara Rutley, the Associate Program Scientist for the Space Station, talking with us about the aquatic habitat that astronaut Aki Hoshide put together yesterday on the space station inside the Kibo Laboratory.